team plans the heist of a bunch of gold bars for the heist of a lifetime. That's basically the story of the town job. I'm John Chang, Dan Edwards.
White governor.
And yeah, I was thinking about how we have talked about a few kind of these kind of heist kind of movies and stuff. And the thing that, I find interesting is that, they will typically have some almost signature kind of elements, like car chase, what's called elaborate kind of, plan and stuff. And then they kind of break it down and all that. But what makes a heist movie kind of like really worth watching, do you think?
That's a difficult one. I mean, I would say, funny, I mean, a lot of the time it's how strong the characters are, because you want to see the sort of dynamics within them. It's got to have some sort of intelligent twist or something that's very unexpected.
Yeah.
I mean, a good example was when we watched the name of it, the remake of
Thomas Crown Affair.
Thomas Crown Affair. There we go.
Yeah, that's definitely the one that comes to mind for me as well.
Yeah, just because the plans themselves are quite clever, and they also have a very sort of intriguing visual element, which is, I think, necessary for any film, really. And and it's just sort of stylistic touches, but mostly the sort of character. In the Thomas Crown Affair, what makes the remake better than the original, I would say, is the dynamics of between Rene Russo and Pierce Brosnan. Likewise, I guess sort of maybe the original Ocean's 11, which we haven't done yet.
That was and that's another one that came to mind also. Yeah,
it had such an all-star cast that actually the natural charisma of the celebrities almost makes makes it worth watching just for that alone.
I was gonna say,
yeah. So I think they need it. To be honest with you, I think regardless of how gritty they are, I think actually heist movies are best when they have a kind of a playful element.
Exactly. Yeah, you definitely nail like kind of to me some of the key things, because like as kind of elaborate and kind of kind of intelligent, as the heist itself is, it's really does come down to the character. And then like you said, even if the characters do come off as like kind of as people who could pull it off and stuff, we still have to care. We still have to like be charmed by them, and then part of the charm is not just even like kind of their personality and stuff, but it's also just simply that they're witty, like Thomas Crown Affair. A lot of it was like kind of the wit between the and it actually, that's the thing though. What's interesting. It's kind of similar to these hero movies too. That like if you don't have a strong villain too, and people who can kind of foil what's going on, it loses something. Like kind of like, in other words, if it just seems like the the bandits or the thieves that we're kind of rooting for are just kind of OP, I guess, so to speak, in gamers terms, then it's really not as much of a contest. But like it's when the cops or the the detectives, in case of like you said, Thomas Crown Affair with Rene Russo, that they're a good foil for the thief and stuff, then we have something kind of to counter that, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, they're all geared around the idea of lovable rogues, and you need to have good enough characters and good enough dialogue to make that rogue lovable. Otherwise, it kind of falls on its face, really. So I think we should point out a bit of background with the Italian Job. Is that,
yeah, please.
Me having grown up in England, is that this is pretty much one of the classic English movies that every bank holiday and Christmas, you can pretty much guarantee the Italian Job will be playing at some point. And it's the sort of thing that had a lot of the time English humor, which apparently didn't translate very well because it really flopped in America, but was obviously a massive success in England, probably, and actually was, funnily enough, quite a big success in Europe as well, but not so much in America. So I mean, it's almost like, in a way, it's funny because this is the first time you've seen it, and obviously I've seen it like more times than I can count, and it's just funny to have like one of these movies which is almost like James Bond to English viewers, and viewers just like, it's like a weird cult movie. But I mean, this is set in the swinging 60s, and a bit of background, England had just won the World Cup, a couple of years prior to this being made. So there's this sort of huge sort of English national pride in this movie that is so over the top. I mean, it's almost Austin Powers level of swinging 60s Englishness in this. So
yeah, we'll get into it, but I almost felt like it was a foreshadowing of Brexit. Kind of. We'll definitely talk more about that later on. But
yeah, absolutely, yeah.
So yeah, I guess why don't we just kind of dive in? Like, one of the things that kind of, for me, that was kind of striking was the soundtracks by Quincy Jones, who recently I was listening to the autobiography of Will Smith, and he talks about how Mr. Jones basically gave him, the Q-Man himself gave him his, break, so to speak, because he had been doing rapping and been successful at that. But then he kind of got in trouble with the IRS and all that kind of stuff and everything. And then, he got invited to this birthday party of, Quincy Jones. And then, it was there that he, had to do an impromptu read for this television show that was just a concept at that point and stuff. And he was like, I'm not ready, I need time to rehearse though. And he basically, Quincy Jones said, well, you can either do it now, or we can have a conversation weeks from now when things change. Like, we may have to rearrange for all these, consider all these executives sort of at this birthday party and everything. So this is somebody who, I guess, he been doing music, in the 60s, I guess, and 70s, and then ends up being this kind of mentor slash maven, I guess, of future stars.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's a very, there isn't really much to the soundtrack other than On Days Like These with Matt Monroe at the beginning, which is a great song. And, it's just great opening theme, someone weaving around the mountain roads of Switzerland.
Yeah.
And Matt Monroe, maybe known from Thunderball, singing the James Bond theme for that. And, and of course, Get a Bloomin' Move On, otherwise known as Self-Preservation Society, which is pretty kind of almost like the incidental music through almost the second half of the entire movie, it seems. Then there is other stuff, but it's not as noticeable as those. But I mean, very kind of catchy, totally kind of iconic soundtrack, really.
Yeah, it's just something that I think for me, it's the scenes, like you said, were so dramatic with kind of the landscape, and even the chases and stuff like that too, of course. But I think having an understated, soundtrack, I guess, kind of makes sense. It's kind of like where, you kind of almost want to be almost have background music, so to speak, for, these scenes that are so visually stunning and stuff.
Yeah. And I mean, the cast in this is it's almost like a cavalcade of well-known faces from England in the 60s. You've got none other than Michael Caine, helming this. Just an amazing performance by him, really. It's just the charisma and the fact that he's kind of just got a great dialogue, great script to work with, really works. You've got Benny Hill, of course, who is that was a surprise. As the not a terribly PC character by today's standards, but I'm sure in the 60s and 70s they would have found it quite funny. And you got Noel Coward, one of the most sort of famous playwrights, actors, composers, as Mr. Bridger, as well as John Le Mesurier as the governor of the prisons. There's lots of very familiar faces all the way through. I'm trying to think of any more. Those are the ones I just thought of at the top of my head.
Definitely the most striking ones, yeah. So.
Even the bit parts are people who would have been in Carry On movies and various other sort of English movies at the time. There's probably a few Hammer horror, Scream Queens, bit parts in this movie, I'm sure.
Some of those faces seem like, we probably should have mentioned when we were doing the Hammer horror discussions.
But almost second to the famous faces is the famous cars.
Yeah,
because this is almost like it could have almost be sponsored by the British car industry.
I mean, it's weird, what's called the Mini
Mini
Cooper
Cooper,
Company,
yeah.
did they like at least like kind of donate the cars, if nothing else?
Well, I think they probably must have got through quite a few. Luckily, they're very cheap cars at the time. But yeah, I mean, you've got Mini Coopers, obviously the star of the show. You've got Jaguars that get sort of like pushed off the side of the
I was gonna
hill.
say too, like the cars that they destroy. It's like, oh my god.
And the Aston Martin, of course. That
yes.
Yeah. So I mean, God, you just wonder. At the time they were probably just production cars. Now you just think, oh my God, there's like millions of pounds going off the side of the cliff there.
Oh my God.
But I mean, it's not only the English cars as well. There's quite, there's a lot of kind of Fiat stuff being posted around. And of course, the entire trade in this movie is a Chinese company, for whatever reason, giving $4 million of gold to the Fiat.
Right.
Why they would have done that in the 1960s is not entirely clear. I guess it was for a big shipment of cars, but yeah, I don't know.
And it's weird because like it seemed like that they had some kind of alliance, and so, and this was during the time where they were very communist. There was no kind of this is like way before like kind of the openness of the late 80s and 90s and stuff like that. And there was none of the discussion about like kind of what's it called, the Iron Curtain coming down, or we're deep in the Cold War at this point.
Yeah, I guess maybe you have to assume that Mao Zedong wants to give everyone Fiats or something like this. But anyway, yeah, so there's this very highly publicized news story that there's going to be $4 million worth or dollars worth of gold arriving in a plane, being packed into a golden van, guarded by men dressed in gold, just in case you had any sort of confusion about what was happening here.
Yeah, that's pretty amazing that like it's like basically laying out for the thieves, like okay, this is the route we're taking, and this is where you can intercept us and stuff.
But I mean, it's just it's just full of sort of 1960s English charm, this movie, really, because you got the cars, you've got the suits, which are pretty awesome all the way through this. Michael Caine, I noticed in the credit, had his own suit assistant, but they are pretty sharp actually. And of course the mafia boss is also wearing an immaculate 60s suit in this. So and of course, you get all these sort of, it's just sort of a nice snapshot of time just to see them driving around London, seeing what the 60s London scene was like. And yeah, there's just so much sort of patriotism in this. It's like there's Union Jacks everywhere, people celebrating football matches, and the minis are in red, white, and blue. I mean, it's just so over the top, and there's these sort of English criminals who are being hired to do bit parts and coming around, oh, these bloody foreigners, and all this kind of thing, and whilst they're disabling their traffic lights and stuff. So yeah, I mean, it's kind of a real, it's weird because the interesting thing for me about this is that it makes no sort of bones about corruption in institutions. Basically the entire prison that Mr. Bridger run, this entire prison is being run by an inmate who's obviously a very wealthy criminal, and but he's he has this sort of token love for the Queen, whilst being like the country's biggest criminal, who's basically organizing these massive sort of heists. And
I feel like it underscores this nationalism. That's a really funny theme, because you don't think of a heist movie as something that would basically bring some kind of nationalism front and center like that and stuff. But this one in particular really does, and I'm kind of curious as to like maybe like you said, it had to do like kind of just the winning the World Cup, and just kind of like this just something that was kind of this period feeling of like national pride.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's kind of the 60s, especially the swinging 60s, were some of the footballers, were definitely on the pretty extreme side of lovable rogues. They did some pretty outlandish things. So I think it was fairly, front and center of the consciousness that back then that rock and roll stars and footballers were kind of like the lovable rogues at the time, and we're getting doing some pretty crazy stuff in the 60s.
That's true. That was something that was like very much in the US conscious, was like this kind of, they call it the British invasion and stuff.
Yeah, and it did seem like, there was, during the 60s, English culture seemed to have this massive influence, even though, economically or politically we didn't. And so, one of the things that underscores this is the fact where they say we're going to go and steal it from the Italians. It's not like we're not going to steal it from anyone in England, and then we're going to sort of bring this money in. Oh, that's going to kind of help us by just stealing lots of money. So that's kind of like the, Mr. Bridges like, oh, well, that's okay then. As long as it's from another country, it's no problem then.
Well, you almost get this feeling too that like it's not really stated, like kind of, outright stuff, but that like that the English government would almost like look the other way if like somehow they found out that that these were the kind of criminals who pulled it off and stuff.
Yeah, and there's also this kind of weird threat, when they're about to, when they face off with the mafia, when they just get to Italy, where they're sort of saying, well, if you kill us, then all the Italian it's like it's so sort of generalized in that the Italians are restaurant owners and ice cream parlor and waiters. It's like, oh, they're all going to suffer, it's like, wow. Right, okay. So as long as all the Italian bankers and insurance people, they'll be fine. It's just all the business owners. So yeah, but there's this kind of idea that this criminal organization, Mr. Bridges, is basically more powerful than the government itself, and will kind of there'll be some retribution.
Well, when they hear of major spoilers, always they hear about the success of the heist and everything like that, Bridger is kind of held like the queen, like he does this kind of little
royal
wave kind of thing and stuff.
That's right,
and like they have this banquet for him and stuff like that. It was pretty like phenomenal to see and stuff like that.
Yeah, it's very over the top, isn't it? Because you've got this the Self-Preservation Society songs kicking in full blast. You've got the cars chasing around, and you've got everyone sort of clapping away, and it's pretty full on, that whole scene. But yeah, I mean, that's I think what's kind of echoed in the whole ending as well, which I know major spoilers here, but there's this kind of we end in this precarious position where they've completed the heist, they've got away with the goal, but they're hanging off the edge of a cliff. It's a literal cliffhanger. But it's also kind of this thing of like, I guess for me it like asks the question of like, how far do you let these sorts of things go before they get out of hand, really, and how much of our national identity should be made up of lovable rogues and people who are breaking the law to some degree. It's a very kind of visually interesting sort of image to be left on with this movie, especially after you've kind of been following these basically lovable criminals all the way through. And I guess it's sort of it's more moral as well, in that saying that, oh, you can't always get away with it. But I think given the fact that you've already kind of set the tone that there is just massive corruption, then it's a really sort of interesting place to end the movie on.
Yeah, I mean that's the funny thing. It's similar to the feeling you have with like Breaking Bad. Like kind of when that series ended and stuff. That can you like, even though that like throughout the series, on the one hand you're kind of like admiring Walter White and stuff, and the other is like can you really justify him kind of getting away with everything in the end and stuff? That's the kind of the moral dilemma we get into as an audience and stuff when we're kind of rooting for these anti-heroes and stuff. Is that can we justify kind of the somebody like this in the end kind of getting away scot-free and stuff?
Well, I think the fun of these sort of things is the suspension of moral judgment, really, in a way of like you're kind of watching them get up to their antics, and then at the end, that's why a lot of these sort of movies like The Sopranos, TV shows like The Sopranos and Breaking Bad have very disappointing endings, because really a satisfying sort of ending to a story has a very kind of clear cut. But if you do that, then you kind of, if you make it too moralistic, then you've kind of made the whole point of what you're watching kind of disappear. So yeah, I think it's quite nice to be able to sort of follow these people on and see. And I'm sure some people live their lives that way, you know, morally ambiguous, and then put it off until after they're dead, basically.
And similar to the ending, this ending stuff, you know, The Sopranos kind of ends on that note. You know, again, you know, major spoilers that, like, you know, it's kind of like its own kind of cliffhanger. You don't quite know, you know, what happens to them. You know, like kind of just kind of cuts to black and stuff.
Yeah. No, I mean it's it's I mean unlike, you know, other heist movies, and I would say the remake as well, you know, everyone gets away and is all very happy at the end, which seems a bit sort of disappointing as well, because it doesn't really get to the heart of what it must be like to live that lifestyle, because you know that there are certain things that you're going to have to sort of like give up forever if you're doing that. You know, yeah, you can go and sit on a beach somewhere tropical, but it's not like you're going to be able to necessarily enroll your kids in the best schools going forwards or anything like that. So, but I mean, you know, the other things that really were, I mean, the dialogue is so good in this movie. It's so some of the one-liners are just great. You know, you're only supposed to blow the bloody doors off is the iconic line. You know, one thing to remember after they've gone through all the plan, and then he goes, one thing to remember, chaps, you know, they do drive on the wrong side of the road. So I really didn't deliver that anywhere near as well as Michael Caine, but you know, I mean, it's just stuff like that all the way through. There's just plenty of humor injected in it, you know, either visually or through the characters. That it's just a fun watch.
I think for me also what's interesting is that you know, one thing that's kind of common to these you know, heist / con, you know, like we kind of ran into that even with 30 Rotten Scoundrels and stuff, is this idea of like no honor among thieves, but they still had to work together though to get the job done, whatever it is and stuff.
Yeah, the most important thing, we have to work as a team, which means you all have to do exactly as I say.
Right.
Which is one of my favorite lines from it. Yeah, no, I mean, but that's the weird thing there. In this, there is this kind of honor. Yeah, there is actually like an honor among thieves in this one, in that they all kind of do pull together and don't sort of screw each other over halfway through. There's no kind of classic 90s plot twist where someone sort of betrays someone halfway through the movie. Which is, again, you know, it's bolstered by this weird sort of quasi-national pride or kind of group sort of, you know,
and also with the ending, like, you know, because at the very end stuff, they have to like all shift their weight, you know, to the one side to counter the gold stuff, otherwise they're all, you know, screwed, you know, literally.
Yeah, I think I saw there was actually like a short either article or demonstration of how they could have got away with the gold, and it's sort of like they gave a demonstration of like, okay, you do this and then you do that, but yeah, I mean, it's I think it's also a very nice visual pun with that, in that when they all backed off, you know, one of them tries to go and get the gold, then all of them kind of follow him, like, because they've been following him. So they're doing this, like, no, this is not the time to be doing that. But yeah, but there's, as I say, visually, there's lots of really imaginative stuff in this movie. I mean, the whole car chase, you know, the last 20 minutes, half an hour of this movie is just sort of 3 Mini Coopers driving through the most sort of unexpected parts of Italian streets, and it's almost like a kind of a cartoon or like a musical, the way everything is coordinated, and you know, and this and
it just totally looks like a really great commercial for Mini Coopers. You know, like, you know, especially that one part in the tubes where like they're kind of like swing to side. In fact, even in the remake, we'll talk about that they, you know, copy that and stuff. Yeah,
absolutely. And I mean, just the stuff that, you know, they're able to weave in and out of these little sort of piazzas, and the Italian cars get stuck, or the Italian policemen sort of crash, and you know, even their sirens make a funny noise as they sink in the water and things like this. So yeah, there's, I mean, it is just like the most monumental sort of advert for Mini Cooper.
Seriously.
And to be honest with you, it's like it is almost like timeless now. You can almost just like say that because of this movie, you know, this is just sort of etched in anyone's sort of mind about this is why you'd get a Mini Cooper, because it's like an iconic 60s car as shown thoroughly in this movie of why it's so cool with Michael Caine. But and then there's the the lovely gag of them pulling into like a car lot of Mini Coopers and then just pulling out again, when the police have gone past. It's almost like they're playing hide and seek kind of visually with cars. I mean, it's just so sort of imaginative, and just a great soundtrack the whole time when it's playing.
Definitely.
The other thing that in terms of soundtrack and noises, I did think was kind of funny that in the 60s, actually one of the most innovative things in this movie, aside from the whole kind of car sequence, is this idea of using computers, like screwing around, using a virus to actually mess up the traffic system. This is the first kind of heist movie with hacking kind of involved, I think. I can't think of one that does that. It's just funny that Benny Hill is the hacker in it.
Right.
And that any kind of computer hacking, any kind of computer process has to have a weird noise that goes along with it in the 1960s when the tape's spinning. Obviously they wouldn't make any noise, but they're going and you're just like, this is really silly. But yeah.
And the way they entice him to come along for the job is that and there'll be plump women.
Yeah, lots of fat Italian women. So easy.
The other thing I thought, we kind of already mentioned a little bit about this this Self-Preservation Society song, and I guess it's something that I wasn't really aware of, but I guess I kind of found a thing on Quora that discussed about how I guess one of the ideas was during that time there were all these societies formed for preservation of this, preservation of that, and stuff like that.
Right. Yeah. And it's just we're just looking out for number one,
right,
and unashamedly, which is just quite interesting, really. But I mean, it's sort of, as you said, there's definitely kind of like Brexit overtones in this, in that it's kind of this idea of these, the English government would probably like to think of themselves as lovable rogues reclaiming money back from Europe and getting away with it scot-free. But but then of course I think we're also stuck on that cliff edge, saying, hang on a minute, guys, I've got a great idea. We'll see. Maybe it'll all work out for the best, the whole Brexit thing. Who knows? But I can see how people draw the similarities there.
Yeah. So shall we move on to
move
2003 remake?
2003, yes.
So I feel like they kind of start off kind of with this Italian job. So it's kind of weird where on one hand they start off with this heist, Italy, and that's what makes it the Italian job and stuff like that. And it kind of gets botched up because of somebody turning on them. So it's funny how they kind of threw in all these things that I guess that was the idea, that they wanted the kind of the main centerpiece to be set in Los Angeles and stuff as being the heist and everything. And
because of course it's the Italian job, right? It has to be set in LA.
That's what kind of is bizarre, I guess, and everything.
It's the Italian job for 10 minutes. And then it's the LA job. But anyway, yeah.
Right. And I mean, okay. I mean, that criticism aside and stuff like that, I have to admit that I really kind of went into it with really low expectations and kind of really expecting to be disappointed, as we typically are with remakes.
Yeah,
there's still something that kind of, I think that maybe it's because of the combination of that they do kind of make a a reasonable ensemble cast and stuff like that. You got Mark Wahlberg as, now he's the Charlie Croker character. Charlize Theron, who we've seen in Mighty Joe Young, is kind of this I guess grieving daughter of the Donald Sutherland character, who's in this case the Bridger. But it's they kill him off too, spoilers, I guess, as always, right away and everything like that. So there's no kind of Bridger kind of celebrating things or whatever. I mean, it's kind of to me a weird mix of on one hand there are things that work with it, and the other is they kind of really strip away anything that makes it really a true remake and stuff.
Oh yeah, I mean, it's kind of a serviceable action heist movie. I'm, you know, you're right, and it's not absolutely awful. And I think part of that is because, you know, by sheer luck, they've managed to just have an ensemble of people who went on to do very well and have a lot of charisma, who all just happened to be in this movie at the same time. So pretty much, you know, the entire cast is pretty well known and all good. I mean, you know, I think Mos Def is actually he's one of those sort of musicians and actors, but you know, I really enjoyed him when he was in Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. I think, you know, you give him a good script, he's actually like a really good actor. And you know, Mark Wahlberg, I don't think he'd really found his stride as an actor in this, because it didn't have any of his kind of comedic timing that he's sort of developed. But you know, Jason Statham's a fairly sort of good, you know, solid sort of actor in most sort of
this
things.
is an interesting timing for him. That's like after he's done the Transporter movie and Snatch, but before he ends up, you know, in the Fast and Furious franchise and stuff.
Yeah, I mean, this is almost a precursor to it, really, isn't it? And you know, Ed Norton, good as a bad guy. You know, you can't really fault him. And Seth Green is actually like a surprising kind of inclusion in this, but you know, he's always pretty good. So I mean, he doesn't. I mean, the one problem with this is that all of these actors have pretty good charisma and are very watchable, but the dialogue is pretty bad in this. That's really the one thing. Some of the sort of jokes are, you know, pretty naff. They don't really land. There's just not very witty dialogue at all. No. It's kind of it's one of those things where I think a lot of those sort of scenes are sort of rescued by the actor's performance rather than, you know, giving them something good to work with.
Right. And then, like, I guess, you know, like the revenge element is really just, you know, to set up the fact that like they're moving everything over and stuff. And, and my thought is that like it had to be because of budget, like where it was much, you know, less expensive for them to film in, you know, Los Angeles than to go all the way to Italy with everybody.
Clearly, yes. I mean, it's kind of, well, I guess the nice thing about it is that you get your 90s plot twist out of the way in the first 10 minutes, and you don't really have to, there's not going to be something that's going to try and subvert your expectations later on. You know, and they've got the whole kind of, it becomes sort of familial and psychological, and there's a revenge betrayal thing, which is a very kind of late 80s 90s sort of thing to do. So yeah, and of course the other sort of key 90s hallmarks are, it's got breakbeat music all the way through. Anything that involves anything technical is always like a breakbeat track.
Yes, that's true.
You know, and there's lots of people tapping on laptops, and you know, there's vector graphics on screens.
Oh my God.
Black screens with green text. You know, we're doing something really technical here. We're measuring the wheels to find out which one's got the gold in it.
Right.
Yeah. You know, and we're doing simulations of cars driving with vector graphics. You know, it's like there's lots of sort of stuff like that that's kind of silly, but yeah, you know, it's kind of, it keeps the visual appeal for a little bit, changes it up, but there's no humor. I think that's the thing. They've tried to sort of, it's a bit sort of, we're flashing things up a bit. We're not going to Italy, so we'll put some vector graphics up, set it in LA, and you know, hopefully that'll be all right. I mean, the director, F. Gary Gary, is actually a music, you know, he made his mark in music videos, and actually directed some of the most sort of iconic rap videos. You know, he did Ice Cube's "It Was a Good Day," and "Murder Was the Case" by Snoop. He did "Waterfalls" by TLC, Miss Jackson by Outkast, and his first movie break was like doing the Friday movie. So he did most of that. Was basically the 90s for him, and then in the 2000s he started to move into action movies, and he did one of the, I think he did like the 9th Fast and Furious movie as well, with some other things. So yeah. But it kind of, it just lacks the visual charm and the humor, really, of the original. Yeah,
certainly, you know, there was no kind of US pride or anything like that.
No, and there's no commentary on, you know, institutional corruption. You know, all that comes out of that is about a little bit of exposition from the guy that Ed Norton's trying to fence his gold to, saying, oh, you know, the government's doing blah, 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 and NAFTA's got more power, and gold, that's the best way of escaping control. And that's about it, really. But I mean, there's other thing. I mean, you know, they do sort of pay a bit of sort of homage to the, as you said, the going through the tunnel, the minis, but that's about it, really. There isn't a lot of other imaginative bits of the car chase sequence. I suppose they do a boat chase in Venice as well. That must have cost a little bit to film, but
definitely seemed like something out of a Bond movie.
yeah, kind of a bad Bond movie, really. And the other bit that's quite cringeworthy is when Donald Sutherland dies, and you've got Marky Mark crying away, going, "This Donald Sutherland." That was like, we're already reaching the limits here of his emotional range at this point in time. Right. And also, like, Charlize Theron goes from hating him and blaming him for her father's death to him then breaking into her house within the same day or two, I want to say. And all of a sudden she's like kind of now romantically kind of interested and charmed by him. It's like, it seems a little inconceivable in the space of 2 days, but who am I to say? Yeah, I think we pretty much hit all the points that, like, basically it's a watchable remake, not one of the best, but definitely not one of the worst either. No. I've got some more. I think for me, it's the weirdly unimaginative use of names that I found really funny in this. The mechanic is called Wrench.
Oh, right.
And Seth Green's character as the hacker is called Napster, which seemed really ridiculous. And then,
but he was the real Napster. It wasn't Sean Fanning.
No, I know, it's ridiculous, isn't it? And then you've got like Mos Def, who in real life is not deaf, I should point out. But in this is deaf, which I thought was kind of funny. But yeah, I think those were the main ones that I noticed. And you got sort of Jason Statham as Handsome Rob for some reason. Rob's a very sort of it's just Rob seems like a very overly simple name for someone of that character. But anyway, and I kind of got tired of everyone talking about gold as bricks. They're always like, we're supposed to know what bricks are. Like, it's 20 bricks, you got 30 bricks. There's only 2 bricks I'm trying to trade here. It's like, I mean, I think with the, you kind of know that after the initial setup of the first 20 minutes or so, there's going to be a lot of filler between then and the big kind of heist chase sequence at the end. So that bit gets pretty slow. There's lots of sort of pseudo semi-romantic scenes with Charlize Theron and Mark Wahlberg, where they're trying to sort of create some kind of idea of semblance of romance throughout the movie, but it doesn't really work. And there's so much of them talking about her dad. They're going, oh yeah, this is to John, and oh, wasn't it great when we knew him and he did this and that. And it's like, he was in it for like 30 seconds, and there's got to be something more entertaining that you can talk about to fill up this hour between 2 action sequences. So yeah, but overall we've seen far worse.
I mean, I think that really just sums it up. I mean, it's just something that, like, it's not the most criminal of the remakes that we've seen, but
nice pun.
What's that?
Nice pun.
But I mean, here's the question then. So what do you feel was like kind of really missing out of all the different things? I mean, we've kind of talked about some different things already, but what would have made it more serviceable, I guess, or more true to the original? What's that?
A funnier, better script. For starters.
Definitely.
I actually think certainly the directing is pretty decent. I think action sequences could have been more imaginative, but they're okay. I think what would have made this a lot better is if the script was really sharp and really funny. You actually had the acting talent there to pull it off. It could have been a really good good remake if they did that.
Yeah.
I think a more imaginative kind of premise as well. The idea of we're just going to steal some gold in LA. You know, it's a bit lackluster, really. There could have been something, you know. I mean, I suppose the original, you could just argue that, well, it's just a robbery in Italy. So I guess it would just be nice to have, you know, had something that would have involved something a bit more imaginative than let's just save costs by shooting it all in LA. But, yeah, for me, but I mean, I could have lived with that if the script was funny. To be honest, I think that's what it really lacked, was the humor.
Yeah, I agree. Like it just like you said, that the dialogue was really just not, you know, the same as like kind of the original and stuff like that. And then you know, and certainly, like you said, that you had the talent, you had the, you know, like kind of the elements were there, but it just definitely what's it called, didn't kind of come together with the writing and stuff. So,
and as we've discussed before as well, the one thing that a lot of modern movies lack is really good music. It's like there's no kind of, you know, what made the Italian Job what it is like you've got this really memorable, catchy theme. We got two really good songs, but this, you know, and you know, any kind of movie from that era, if it's got John Williams doing the soundtrack or John Barry or someone like this, you know, they're very memorable and just fantastic soundtracks, and everything is so incidental now. There's nothing that you can really latch onto. It's like saying, oh, that was that music from that movie. Well, I mean, you do have some, but it's pretty rare these days.
Yeah, so, I mean, especially when you compare it to, you know, what we had with the Thomas Crown Affair remake. I mean, you know, that was like one of the most memorable soundtracks, I'd say, in recent history for, you know, like a heist movie or any kind of, you know, action kind of oriented one stuff.
Yeah, I mean, you know, they kept it simple and just remade the original soundtrack as well, which is a very smart thing to do, I think, 'cause it did stick in your head. But it was still had lots of 90s technical breakbeaty stuff of, you know, cameras were being done and people were being tracked. So it's not immune from that either. But yeah, I mean, it seems like these are kind of simple things to really give your film character that people just don't seem to put in movies, which I've never really quite understood. They try, I suppose, but I don't know. It's just, you wonder who's in these kind of audiences that says, oh yeah, that's actually funny, and that isn't. And so yeah, so that would be my take. Will they do it again? Yeah, I reckon give it another 10 years, we'll have another Italian Job somewhere. This will probably be like a post-Brexit, you know, Italian Job, English people going over to Italy to, I don't know, maybe reclaim some lost property or something like this that got lost in Brexit or something like this, and they're trying to, I don't know. Yeah, could be anything.
Yeah, and my other last thought is kind of really not so much the remake, but you know, that I think more recently, kind of audiences here have kind of associated Michael Caine as more of a supporting role, so like that. But I think, you know, like watching The Hind Job really reminds you how much of a star in his own right he was way before kind of, you know, that he's become more known as a supporting, you know, actor, stuff like that.
Yeah, I think as well, that's probably, he was maybe better known in England as a leading man for a long time. I mean, a lot of the 60s, he did, you know, the Harry Palmer characters, who was almost like as popular as James Bond. Okay. Slightly more kind of, I guess you could say, grittier, a bit more kind of cynical kind of version of James Bond, with the Ipcris file and his $1 billion brain, a little bit more, which is a bit more of a silly take on it. But you know, he was in, well, obviously the Italian Job. He was pretty much the lead guy in Zulu as well, which was a bit more controversial, I guess. Yeah, but quite a few movies, and you know, he's had a long career. And then he kind of, in the 70s, I'm sure he did. He's worked pretty much from the get-go right up to the present day. But I mean, he did much more kind of more dramatic roles during the 80s. He did sort of Educating Rita, which I think, I could be wrong, I think somebody won an Oscar for that movie. But yeah, I mean, yeah, he's just like a pillar of English acting, Michael Caine. Yeah.
I was thinking also that you know, there's actually a couple of movies that, you know, we can actually do as you know, looking at remakes that have involved him. You know, one is Alfie's come to mind.
Yeah.
Another one's Get Carter.
Get Carter, yeah, which is a brilliant movie. The
Okay.
original with the original with Michael Caine is a brilliant movie. I think the remake has like Sylvester Stallone or someone in it. It's really ridiculous. It's like the most.
Right. Let me see here.
Yeah, it's you just know from the get-go it's going to be terrible.
Oh, John Travolta.
John Travolta. Yeah, there you go. That says it all right.
Oh no,
there.
sorry. It is Sylvester Stallone.
I was going to say.
Okay.
John Travolta's
right.
probably
Yeah.
the bad guy because that's probably
Right.
Post Pulp Fiction. John Travolta's a bad guy kind of
Right.
era. Yeah. I mean, certainly the Alfie remake is pretty terrible. I actually went to the premiere of Alfie, funnily enough. That was one of the only film premiere I've ever been to, but I was there. I was actually the one thing that I was. First of all, I spent entirely too long on the red carpet walking along, and all the people were saying, "Get out of the bloody way! We're trying to photograph the actors behind you." I'm like, "God, this is what it must be like to be a B actor against these,
Right.
and be like a sort of D level actor where you've got real celebrities behind you. It must be very disheartening. And then I think when I actually did see the real acts in it, I was just blown away by how short they were. They were all just tiny. I just towered over them. And I mean, I'm not massively tall. I mean, I'm like 5'10", 5'11". But I mean, they were just like minuscule.
Interesting.
Yeah.
But I guess, like they say about, kind of the camera kind of puts inches on these folks and stuff.
Totally. Yeah. But that was my overriding memories. But yeah.
So yeah, I guess what's called we those are definitely a couple of remakes we possibly look at some point. And any other thoughts? And
I think what you have to do is, if we have watched a series of Michael Caine movies, you then have to watch The Trip, which is two English comedians taking a sort of a random trip through the English countryside. And it's both of them are very good impressionists. And it's them, there's actually whole scenes of them trying to do impressions of Michael Caine and impressions of like Roger Moore and various other sort of classic English actors. So I mean, you'll get a real good appreciation for how funny that movie that is afterwards. So
sounds good. So yeah, I guess we'll call it a wrap for this one. And once again, John Chang with Dan Edmonds, and we will see you at the movies.